Welcome everyone to the another live episode of Talk with Coach Shweta Bajaj and Pro Impact live series. Today we have with another guest speaker, Minouti. And today we are going to talk on a wonderful topic, very well deserved topic, which is listening. In communication, we over underrate listening, how to listen, whether to listen or not. And that we are going to discuss today. Thank you so much, Minoti, for accepting our request and being on this platform. Everyone, I want to introduce about Minoti. She is assistant professor and also she is a wonderful expert communication trainer. She is working with professionals, students around soft skills and communication. And today she is going to guide us how listening can help you to become a good communicator, how listening can help you to make sure you are understanding the person better so that you can respond better. Welcome, Minoti, on the stage. Please introduce yourself from where you are, what you do.
Thank you, Shweta. I think Shweta has given you some preliminary idea about who I am. So I belong to an organization and a management institute called Kohinoor Management School. I teach MBA students. Primarily, I teach Gen Z currently, and I get a lot of insights about how they think, how they think differently, innovatively, and through my interactions. Since I'm a communication person, through my interactions, I pretty much see the changing trends in communication, especially the four skills that we are talking about: speaking, writing, listening, and reading. So I have very interesting insights to offer on this, and Shweta has been kind enough to let me speak on listening. So I'm very indebted to her for this opportunity. This is something new and exciting.
Awesome. I'm super excited too because see, listening is an underrated thing. In an emotional intelligence, we say you should listen, you should be active listener. And in communication also, we know okay, we when we listen, then only we communicate better. So
Sure.
I want to know from you, Minoti, like what does listening mean to you? Whether it's hearing or it's more than that.
I think what initially, even when we speak to students, we and in any other forums, when it comes to listening, the first thing that every communicator does is mark out the difference between listening and hearing. Hearing is just the process where the words are falling on your ears, okay, and listening is a more intensive kind of a process. And definitely, you said it's not hearing; it is listening with intent, right? So I think pretty much every profession, whether it is teaching, whether it is anything to do with the corporate world, requires listening as an important skill. In fact, I would say, everybody in everyday life requires listening. Whether it is something as simple as the fruit vendor or vegetable vendor to the CEO of a company, everybody requires listening. It's a very important skill, very underrated. And not only that, everybody has to be good at listening and retaining what you listen to. I just out of curiosity, Shweta, all of us visit so many restaurants, right? I personally like to visit a restaurant where the waiter is recollects you, okay, recalls, right, what you generally eat. And now again, how does that person do it? It has to go beyond. That person would have listened to you, right, and then retained, focused, and then retained. So this is as simple as that. Listening does not just mean hearing words. It means it's a very intensive kind of an exercise. It means retaining what you listen or what you actually hear and process. So yes, and again, come to an organization. In an organization, many a times we go to our reporting authorities and say something to them, tell them something, okay. Many a times we feel that they are listen we doubt whether they are listening or not, okay. But in some strange conversations later on, they happen to tell you, okay, you had mentioned this, and the joy that it gets to you, okay, okay, this person was actually listening to me when I was saying this. So I think listening is a very important skill, and it goes beyond just the words falling on your ears. It means listening with intent. That is probably my response to your question.
I mean, you have mentioned a very key concept here, intent. Because when we are in organization development and team meeting, whether the person is understanding, listening it, and amazingly you have shared that, understanding it, in digesting it and then recalling back. Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. I would also go to the restaurant or place where people listen. Immediately this is the amazing fact which you have shared. Now, when the last time you truly listened or heard, everyone share this concept because sometimes we feel he or she is not listening. Still, he or she is listening. So why it is so? Why this happen that person don't able to feel that the other person is listening?
Okay. So again, if you speak about when was the last time I felt truly heard in a conversation, I would rephrase it by saying that when did I feel that someone was actually listening to me? To tell you very
Hmm.
honestly, it doesn't happen very often. And you asked me the reason why it does not happen. I think I read an interesting quote on a shirt once, that there are too many tabs open in my head. That is exactly why it happens. So, like there are too many tabs which are open on pretty much every device, okay, there are also too many tabs that are open in people's heads. That is why it happens that people don't really listen to each other, right? I have colleagues who keep checking their phones every 30 seconds, like the world is going to collapse without the phone, honestly. Okay. Now, what happens is that when you do this, you miss out on listening to the details. And when I say listening is, pretty much it's not an activity which you do only with the ears. In fact, even observing. Many a times there is a mismatch between what people are speaking and people are emoting. Okay. Emoting is
Hmm.
also a part of listening. It is not just, we can't isolate one aspect of listening. Many a times, people are trying to tell you something, you ask them a question, right? And they are using the right words, but their non-verbal communication does not match, right? So that, when I say listening, it also means observing. So I think listening is beyond just, again, coming back to the first thing that you asked, it's beyond just hearing out a person. And yes, I told you that I don't feel often that people listen in any conversation. Attention is constantly compromised in any conversation that I see. People are mindlessly scrolling reels, developing a lot of FOMO, looking at statuses, I should say. And I think it's a lot of food for thought. It's not the fact that attention is getting compromised. Everybody needs to think for themselves, why is it getting compromised? Is the gadget making you not listen to things? Right? I'll just give you a simple example, and I'll put the question to rest. I was supposed to interview a person recently at the institute, and it was a fireside chat. Now, every question I asked, after answering every question, this person was looking at his mobile. Okay. And I was getting a little restless. I was wondering, what is it that this person is checking? Is that person checking whether, too much time is getting wasted? And that person just said, no, I'm just hoping that I'm on the right track. But it is very distracting also when when you don't look at the person, you look at something else, you're distracted. So again, coming back to your question, Shweta, I don't think I feel that somebody is listening to me in a conversation very often. It's very rare that people actually listen to you in a conversation.
Very true. I mean, you have very truly shared here that people often not listen. Even the change, the emoting which you shared, what the person is saying and what I'm understanding, how I am feeling, and maybe it's different if we are not paying attention. And
Yes.
non-verbal cues and multitasking, majorly the attention depreciation which is happening right now. And I think
Yes.
coming generation, we can see more in this coming generation because Gen Z says, okay, mother is not listening, father is not listening, they are not understanding my emotions, my boss is not listening. It happens a lot of the time. So, according to you, Minoti, what are the common misconceptions around this listening? Because we have to improve this so that we grow in our, every sort of life, whether in corporate culture or whether in our personal relationships.
Yeah. I think the common misconceptions I'll talk about professional settings, the common misconceptions
Mhm.
about listening. I may be I may be making a very bold statement here, but the common misconception I have heard people that every person in a leadership position is a good listener. I don't think that happens. Okay. Sorry. But good leaders have the capacity to filter out the unnecessary details. Okay. They can be good listeners, but not everybody is a good listener. Okay. People typically feel that they are good listeners. No, However, I have seen a few leaders who, kind of now many a times when employees go to their reporting authorities, some of them also have a habit of doing a lot of small talk, okay, which may not be really the norm with leaders, right? You have to get to the point and kind of be crisp. But it is
Mm.
interesting when leaders actually listen, right? They use the small talk for further conversations, okay? And
Mm.
the small talk that people do, they use it, and when leaders are listening to it, they use it to connect with employees better, okay? So, although it's a
Mm.
misconception, if it is turned around, I think employees, relationship between employees and leaders enhances when listening gets corrected in the in the equation. I think the second misconception which I have seen is when people nod, they are listening. So this is another misconception. Ki aisa kiya, aisa, you're looking at the person, but it is not necessary that you're listening to people. That is the second misconception. The third also, now this is exactly the opposite. Many a times I have got tricked by students, by colleagues who are actually continuously looking at the phone, and I'm feeling that am I talking to thin air? And you feel that their attention is compromised, but they are fully aware of what the other person is speaking. So so ये भी है कि sometimes you feel, no, even between friends you say you are not paying
Mm.
attention to me, yaar. you know you're looking at your phone continuously. That person has, maybe some people have the ability to focus. So these are common things which happen, some misconceptions which I could think of when it comes to listening.
Yeah, I mean, active listening. Last one is very interesting, which you have shared that people, yet they look like they are not paying attention, still they are listening because they train themselves in that way. Still,
Yeah,
presence of the person, because when you are listening a person, there is a non-verbal communication which is all happening, which is verbal communication that is happening. Is it necessary that in the last statement you also shared, they are not even looking like listening? So non-verbal communication, how much is it important also in listening?
I think it is very important in listening. If now I am a communicator, okay, so I pay attention to nonverbal communication a lot. But
Mm.
it helps when you have an expressive face. Okay, it helps when, I mean, I gauge whether my audience, not just my students, but my audience, even in a personal setup, I gauge when people are listening and when they are zoned out. Okay, because their expression, their eyes,
Mm.
okay, the facial expressions tell me everything. Sometimes it also happens that their facial expressions tell me, Minoti, I think you should stop speaking, don't ask anything.
Mm.
Okay,
Right.
so, and more often than not, it turns out to be right. So I think nonverbal communication, one has to pay attention to nonverbal communication, not just as a communicator, but any person, because you have to take those cues. That is why I said, even in earlier, listening is not just listening to the words, it is also observing. Everything is connected beautifully. All the skills are connected. Listening is connected to
Mm.
speaking, it's connected to non-verbal communication. So I think non-verbal communication is very important. I, my best friend's husband, especially when people are disconnected, their non-verbal communication is not matching their speaking. He always tells me, he uses a very interesting term. He says, Minoti, audio is not matching video. So
Yeah.
which means that your non-verbal communication is not actually matching your, what you're speaking. So I think non-verbal communication is very important. It is the it is a
Mm.
game changer, and even in communication it is said, I majority is your non-verbal communication. If you are enthusiastic, the person opposite you is enthusiastic. Non-verbal communication is very important.
Yeah, I mean, indeed. And very truly say, video should match audio, like synchronization should be there. Okay,
Yeah,
wow. And see, here when we say about listening, there is a concept called active listening. And
yeah.
active listening is overlooked. How does it actually look like active listening in professional setting, according to you, Note?
Active listening has different aspects. Okay, in meetings, for me, active listening is not just, like I said, nodding your head. It is also
Mm.
probably jotting down. I have a practice that, irrespective of whether AI is making notes by way of minutes, okay,
Mhm.
I carry my diary. I keep making notes. According to me,
Mhm.
that is what qualifies active listening. And I don't do that just for meetings. I do that even when I go to counsel a student, because I have to, my way to record it in my head is to note it down, so that at some point in time I will go through it and I will remember, right? Also, for me,
Mhm.
active listening is observing non-verbal communication. Okay, more often than not, किसी का झूठ पकड़ना है तो non-verbal communication ही observe करो उसका. For me, that is active listening. For me,
Mhm.
gauge a person's attitude. Okay, many a times I tell students, I said, when people are a little more, when people have attitude, or when they are arrogant, okay, or not even arrogant, when they are a little more, क्या बोलते हैं, self-obsessed perhaps, okay, or when they want to
Mhm.
make it known that ये point मैंने बनाया है, okay, this is my
Mhm.
contribution to this entire thing. So they will keep telling
Yes.
you, according to me, as per me. So now see, again, I'm a communication person, so I realize these language markers. When you are talking, it
Yeah.
means you are talking. I don't have to say, if I qualify my sentences by saying, Shweta, according to me, listening is, of course, I'm talking about my view. Why do I have to say according
Mhm.
to me? Right? So these slight things you realize when you actively listen, to people. So
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
yeah, so these are more or less, this is my, kind of definition of active listening. And of course,
Right.
active listening also happens when I have a lot of gadget hygiene. Okay. When I'm in sessions, I don't look at my phone. That is my way of actively listening. I In meetings, my phone is always face down. I don't My notifications are off. So this is, of course, your journey towards active listening, but active listening requires a lot of practice. And of course, it also requires me to shut all the tabs in my head, for which it takes time.
Mhm.
Practice is
Wow.
the yeah.
Very few people can do this, gadget detoxification and even the meetings not using the mobile phones because, notifications are day-to-day norms. And wonderfully, you have shared. I really like the idea which I picked from you guys because nowadays AI is pretty much common. AI take notes, AI take make summaries, everything is, online, everything is available.
Yeah.
Still having diary with you, noting down in your own way, how your brain programmed, how your brain store the memory. Amazingly, you have shared this technique with every one of us, and it's very helpful. Wow. And now, like you are a communication trainer, you are working with students, professionals, upcoming leaders, how they
Yeah.
can build their communication and soft skills. How you help, like how can professionals train themselves to become a great listener or answer
um
communicator?
yeah, so listening, like I said, is very important in any form of communication. And we are living in a very distraction heavy world. Okay, so I think it requires a lot of discipline is the answer. Okay, begin small. Now, how can you begin small? I do this exercise with my best friend. Okay, when we listen to conversations, when I speak to her, I test
Mhm.
myself. I said, many a times, between friends, stories get repeated. Okay, and
Right.
I tell her, I said, yeah, you've told me this. So my best friend is a dentist, right? And so she's narrating about her patients, so on and so forth, right? So I pretty much, through her conversations, get an opportunity to rehearse, right? I use that opportunity to rehearse. Ki, okay, this is your patient. The second time she's telling me the story, I said, yeah, I know this is your patient. So I use that as an exercise, as an impetus, right? And listening does not have to be, yes, there are formal things like listening to podcasts, listening to videos. A very
Mhm.
common practice that I do is, Shweta, some videos, maybe TED Talks I listen to, I jot down important ideas, and even after after I listen to the video, I try to recall what were the major ideas in this video. Okay,
Mhm.
so that is an opportunity for me to jog my memory. So simple things
Right.
you can do. It is not that you really need to do something really great. Anytime. Now again, this is when I have a conversation with students, I make it a point to touch base on conversations when I am speaking to them as a class. I try and remember their names. I try and remember their hobbies. Okay. Here, listening is one part of the story, but what do you do next? How do you connect it? Okay. So I do a lot of memory exercises. ठीक है, इस बंदे का, this person is this is that person's hobby. So I try and kind of connect it and remember it. Okay, I listen to it, yes, and I remember it. And also one more part of very active listening that I do is, Shweta, when I get saturated, I my job requires a lot of talking throughout the day and a lot of listening too. I mentioned to you that many students come to me for advice, so it means that I
Right.
have to listen to them very patiently and very calmly. Sometimes we are all right. Sometimes I myself am saturated, so it means that I need to take a break. I take the liberty to tell students, can I be with you in 15 minutes? Okay, can I be with you in 20 minutes? If certain things do not require a phone call and requires a face-to-face conversation, because I feel that it will be better if I connect with them and gauge their non-verbal communication, I take the liberty to do that. Any good listener also has to see when that person has reached his saturation level and stop listening and then pick up. Okay, so it does, you cannot expect anybody to listen at one go for a very long time. So listening also means when do you stop and when do you start afresh. So a lot of these things I keep doing, connecting, kind of maybe meditating also, because that it requires you get saturated beyond a point. So yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much a lot of.
These are the great, ideas and way to bring discipline into the life so that you listen actively. And wonderfully, you have shared here setting boundaries, setting a
Yes,
way that, yes, I have listened you, I understand, and giving a space between, that there is a space between two words, which is like digesting that word, digesting these things, emotions. Yeah, very important. I'm just
yes,
understanding, I'm just digesting and understanding these words which you have shared, that listening and how to bring this discipline into the life. You
yes,
mentioned like you have this work which you also done with students counseling,
yes,
and
yeah,
you took some time apart. So for some people, I think like emotional intelligent people or people who have lots of empathy, they say, okay, I'm a giver. For them, setting boundaries may be sometimes difficult. Difficult to say that, okay, currently I also need some space. Do you think it happens?
it does. I'll give you an interesting example. During COVID, okay, many a times, Shweta, we presume that people won't understand, right? During COVID, all educators, it happened that we had to be there for our students, okay, and we were told to be there 24 by 7 for our students. Now, with things going on at home also, 24 by 7 access, it was a very romantic and a utopian idea, I should say. Ki
Right.
perfect, 24 by 7 you are available. But it plays on your health, it plays on your mind. Because when you are
Mm.
counseling someone, again, I'm not a trained counselor, okay? It has just been there with experience. So you reach your saturation point and you also need to unwind. So initially, I had this apprehension, which you said, what will people say if I draw boundaries? Okay? But strangely, my students beautifully understood. When I told them, I said, I have some commitments even at home. Let us try and connect tomorrow. Okay? People, we, again, another part of listening, probably I will connect this to listening, is when we presume a lot. हम लोग presume बहुत करते हैं. We feel that people will not understand. Sometimes, I mean, people understand beautifully. So, presuming is again hurdle to listening. Okay, assuming is also hurdle to listening, right? So I don't think that happens. I think students also, anybody, whether it is students, whether it is anybody, only thing is the way you tell people matters. I think as a communicator, when I tell students like a human being, and I don't say, if, see, look at the difference. If I say, actually, I'm a little tired now, and I want to really do justice to our interaction. Could we connect in another 15 minutes or 20 minutes? Or, I'm really saturated today. If this can wait till tomorrow, could we connect tomorrow with a fresh mind? Okay. If I say the Pomodoro technique generally focuses on the fact that you do something for maybe 25 to 20, 25 to 30 minutes without, you do one activity with focus. I'm a great advocate of monotasking. I'm telling
Mm.
you frankly, multitasking is very overrated, right? And monotasking, I think, is the key to focus, right? So Pomodoro technique, means that you do one task, complete it to its logical conclusion, right? And I find great value in that technique. Usually I am not a kind of person who starts working, and again, most of my work I have to, kind of generate a lot of stuff because I write a lot of stuff. I create a lot of, whether it is presentations, documents, bahut sara, and a lot of worksheets, exercises. So that requires a lot of focus. I cannot do that work by, opening a whole lot of tabs on my laptop. Not possible for me, because then those things don't come to me. So with Pomodoro, when I focus on one task for 20 to 25 minutes, I complete it to its logical conclusion, then switch on to another. So these are the two techniques that I do. Personally, I follow this: the focus exercise and Pomodoro.
Amazing techniques. I mean, it's like meditating in the moment, being in the present state, and
Yes.
then understand what is going on in your inner world as well as focus outside. Wonderfully, you have shared these techniques. And you shared multitasking to first one task at a time for 20 minutes. I was just thinking, like, you are living in a very high, fast paced environment. I was in Bombay, so I know like it's a very fast. Everyone is working. It's like big commitments are there. Is it possible? Because I think AI is there. Everything is so competitive nowadays. Multitasking is becoming norm slowly. To do multiple tasks, plan in advance, and everything. Is it possible to shift to this thing, Pomodoro? You are
It is.
practicing still. Yeah.
Yes. Again, I can't say Pomodoro in isolation. There are a lot of things simultaneously, Shweta, that one should do. For example, I'm not a person who gets absorbed or sucked into multiple work. I don't support that. Okay. Now, all of us have
Mm.
a lot of tasks throughout the day. I'm a person who
Right.
plans my, okay. I, again, it needs a lot of prioritizing. Certain things need to be completed in, and again, this requires planning at the beginning. Okay. So I plan my day. I say, "Ki these are priority today, these have to be finished. Okay, these have to be completed. The rest can wait." Right? So if you plan, everything is possible. And I, again, a few of my colleagues, again, you will have colleagues and reporting authorities rushing you, saying, "I need this." I had a conversation with a colleague once. He was working with me on a team, and he was trying to say, "Ki, Minoti, ye karna hai, wo karna hai, ye karna hai, wo karna hai." And I said, "Do you want me to do this well and execute it perfectly?" He said, "I wanted to execute it to be executed perfectly." Then I said, then I need time. I cannot be rushed. So when I say, it also requires, Shweta, to draw a lot of boundaries. It is very difficult. The most difficult thing
Right.
I've done in my life is saying no to a lot of things.
True.
So
Happens.
but it happens. The technique works. Okay. And when I'm in something, I'm totally in it. I'm not at 100 places at the same time. And I don't want to be at 100 places at the same time. It means me missing out. Now, for example, I'm with you here. Okay. I'm missing
Mm.
out on a few
Mm.
things, right? But I'm okay with missing out on a few things. That you have to be comfortable with. I'm not a person who has FOMO. No. Again, there are a lot of weird things that I do. Maybe weird to the world. I never check anybody's status message. मुझे नहीं है वो FOMO का ये.
It's very important though.
So maybe people might not agree with a lot of things I do. I don't have my blue tick notifications on. So, a lot of things, like I said, maybe there is an interesting book that I read in during COVID. It is called Indistractable by this writer called
Oh,
Neer
yes,
Aya. Okay.
yes,
So
yes,
a lot of
yeah.
things I have adapted from this book, which means keeping very few notifications on the phone. So I don't watch reels. सारा कुछ है. So it's not a one-off process. It is.
I mean, it's a way of living which you are living in the present moment. It's like
Yes.
cherishing the moment and cherishing the meaning of life in your own way. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Minoti, for sharing. Now, in perspective of leadership and
Yeah.
in respect of organization culture, we want
Yeah.
to know from you how listening can help develop the impactful leadership in
Okay.
the any organization.
Yeah. So I feel now I'm not going to give you a lot of gyan, but something which I thought about, how listening can impact leadership effectiveness is, I think we have immense respect for people who listen, right? So the first thing that you develop when you listen, when when a leader listens to you, when a team leader or any reporting authority listens to you, you develop a lot of respect for that person. बहुत ही basic है, right? So when when those leaders recall, now there are so many times when I go and interact with the reporting authorities and they recall certain conversations that we've had. So the thing that comes to my head is, my God, I'm so small in my organization, but how come this person has, actually retained the information so beautifully? So I develop a lot of
Mm,
respect for that person. I think, this is the basic. When you listen to a person, that person feels respected. Okay. And once
mm,
you feel respected, everything else aligns. Leadership almost, of course, it has to be followed by action. That is another, thing, that when the leadership listens to you is one. But do they actually, there are many people who will nod their head and say, yeah, true. Also, people do this thing, I understand. And then they go and do exactly what they want. See, I understand is a very empty expression if it is not followed up by action, right? So I think listening leads to respect, and listening with action. Okay, at least if you are not able to take action, close the loop. Get back to the person and say, sorry, I probably will not be able to do this. I tried to do this, but then close the loop. So I
mm.
think when it comes to listening, it is closely related to respect. And once respect aligns, then probably, everything you everything aligns. So listening is key to respect. And once respect is in the equation, then I think pretty much everything is set, is what I feel.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's very important for every leader, for an impactful leader.
Right.
Listening is the key to build trust, to build
Right.
rapport with the team. And team is
Absolutely.
often to come to you to share, not only share solutions, also share problems. Because
Yes.
I was just listening, like there are lots of missions, lots of organization culture mistakes happen in the past. Like I'm not naming it. Still, because of this listening, because manager not listen the team member, or
Yeah.
engineer what they are trying to share, and forward it to the superiors. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very key important aspect. So any last message, Minoti, you want to share with our audience?
Last message. I think the message that I would want to share is, there is no quick formula to listen. Okay. It is now, again, Sweta, something which you do, right? What you do as, by way of this live session, that is also an exercise in listening. You have got better. Again, you have to continuously, one thread you miss in whatever, whoever you're interviewing, it's an opportunity lost. Okay. So I think the message that I would want to leave to the audience is that listening can improve only by practice. And when I say practice, there is no special thing that you actually need to do. Okay. It could be as simple as going to a restaurant, okay, sitting with your family and not using your phone for the conversations that you are making. Okay. It could be as simple as this. And like I told you, it requires a lot of discipline. In fact, I don't know, people must have heard this song, no? सुनिए. So उसमें भी I was just thinking yesterday, I said कि song also has a message. कि I will not say प्यार, but I said I will say PR, that is public relations. You will be able to maintain better public relations when you listen to people, right? So I think, no special training, but yes, it requires a lot of discipline and it requires a lot of practice. Listening requires that. So this
Oh
is
wow. I mean, it's like a wonderful ending to this episode. And that listening, and when you listen, you build this great social relations, you build
yeah.
great communication capability. Thank you, Minoti, for being here, for sharing such a valuable insights with our audience. And thank you everyone for listening this. Do share this episode with your friends, colleagues, whom you want to improve. It will help us to reach more audience. And you can also comment us on which topic you want to listen more. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day ahead. Thank you, Minoti.
Thanks, Shweta. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you.